Hello, everyone. I hope that you can hear me, Jake. We are live from our studio, virtual studio in Belgrade. So one additional connection between Belgrade and the Cleveland, Ohio, of course. If I understand correctly, we are having a break right now, 10 more minutes. Yeah, of course. Thanks. Hello, Hannah, can you just change your name?
Oh, yes. I can do that. Okay.
We have a cool name. So just to check, can you just start sharing your screen? See if everything is fine.
Let me do that. All right, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Great. And sound is okay?
We can say that.
Okay. Great.
So I will just share a screen. After that, I will give you the floor. So basically,
Should I stop script sharing or just let it be for now?
basically we are starting in a few minutes.
2 minutes?
In a few minutes, we are
Oh,
starting.
okay. Yeah.
Do not do few, sorry.
Sorry, no. Okay. And someone will just cue me when it's time to start talking.
Yeah, I will. We are starting in 9 minutes, basically, because in
Cool. Should I just leave it running the screen sharing until then?
you can mute yourself. I will just put on just to put on repeat promo video.
Sorry, what?
You can mute yourself. I will put promo video.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We are going to start in a few seconds. So basically, it's my great honor that we are here back with with our next speaker for today, and that is going to be Hannah Arson from Pandata. What I wanted to tell you basically about the Hannah as an introduction to this part of the conference is that Hannah is working as the head of data science director at Pandata. More to that, also, she's going to tell us today to share with us her talk, and basically she's going to tell us more about the building resilience and adoption in healthcare AI solution. Basically, in Pandata, they help to innovate organization, design, and develop AI-powered solution. Without any further ado, I would just like to call Hannah to share her screen so we can start with the presentation.
All right, well, thank you for the introduction. Let me share my screen here.
Okay, I will mute myself and take off the video. So basically, the floor is yours, Hannah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, it's working. Nice.
All right, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining here today. I'm excited to be coming here from Cleveland talking about building resilience and adoption in healthcare AI solutions. So my name, again, is Hannah Arnson. I'm the Director of Data Science at Pandata. And Pandata is an artificial intelligence design and development firm based here in Cleveland. And we work with innovative organizations to help design and develop AI solutions. And something we pride ourselves on is having approachable, human-centered solutions with a focus on ethics. Now, today we'll be talking about building resilience and adoption. To kind of give you a little bit more overview of where we're going to be going, we'll start by talking about what is the data science and AI process. We'll talk about a project that at Pandata we've been working on for a few years that has a lot of relevance to this healthcare AI context, and also some very important lessons learned about building resilience and adoption. We'll talk about the approach and pitfalls and the obstacles that we have overcome and lessons learned. Now let's start by talking about the data science process. What do we mean when we say this? At Pandata, we like to break things down into two separate, highly iterative components. There's the design side of things, and then there's the development side of things. From the design side, we begin with discovering and acquiring data. So this includes things like understanding what data sources are available, what's the data quality, how do things interact and tie together. Also, there's a very important discovery component that is beyond the data and understanding how organizations work, what kind of processes are in place, what different roles and all of these things come together. From there, we move on to experimenting and learning. This would be trying out different modeling techniques and approaches, iterating when things don't quite work the way you had expected or hoped, and learning from that experience, trying again, and so on. There we go into a proof of concept. A proof of concept we think about as a way to validate that our approach is working. So we're getting results that are meaningful and promising. And this is typically done on a static data set. So at this point, there is a decision where we go on to building the pilot. And the difference.
He had a thesis at that time, right? I might have run and he had a thesis, and then it would have been.
Sorry, I'm not sure what just happened there, but I guess I'll keep talking. So from there, we go into the pilot. And the pilot differs in that it is no longer just operating in a static data set. It's incorporated into the ecosystem that it'll ultimately be operating in. And so involves more nuances in different data and dynamics and touches many systems. Ideally there, we also demonstrate that this is not only statistically valid, but bringing in value as well. There we go on to build resilience. So things like ML ops and making sure we have pipelines and processes in place for this to be a long-term sustainable process. And then finally going into the scaling, education, and empowering phase of things. This involves going full-fledged on the engagement and scaling it up to include all of the data sources and individuals or different components that you would ultimately doing. It also involves educating everyone who touches the outcome of this AI solution and making sure that they are empowered to use the information and make decisions. And in many processes, or in many projects, there's really no shortage of opportunities for things to go off the rails. However, for the purposes of today, let's assume we make it through this first loop unscathed. And let's talk about some things that can go wrong later into a process, independent from the data itself. Now, if you were to survey AI practitioners across many industries, including healthcare, and you would converge on a set of common pitfalls and problems that are run into. So things like a lack of data governance. So this refers to roles, policies, standards, monitoring processes set up to ensure that data is being monitored and used effectively, it's being used efficiently and properly over time. A lack of appreciation for organizational complexity. An AI solution likely touches many aspects of a company, and without appreciating how all of those components fit together, there are going to be missing pieces that set you up for failure. On a similar note, insufficient change management. Okay, so with this organizational complexity comes nuances and processes that already exist. It is essential to be able to involve people from the beginning to make sure they're on board and have complete buy-in to manage how their lives are going to be changed by adoption of this AI solution. Lack of long-term planning. You know, what works in a model today or in 3 months might not work in 6 months or in a year. Data changes, life changes, and having this kind of plan for how things are monitored and pivoted is essential. And ultimately, all of these condense down into a lack of trust. Without proper communication, buy-in, these kinds of variables, the end users are not going to trust the model. And so things like model transparency and explainable AI and having frequent and often conversations about ethics and biases that might be present are essential for getting past this lack of trust. Now, today I'm going to talk about a project that we've been working on at Pandata around developing an AI solution where we encountered some of these pitfalls and really overcame. We were working with a healthcare technology company that has a program that works to qualify individuals for a particular program based on individuals' medical history. We began our collaboration with the goal of taking their existing rules-based approach and developing an artificial intelligence-based approach. Some of the goals of this were to automate a highly manual process, to build in flexibility and adaptability over time. With a set of complex rules, it's difficult to pivot as things change. However, AI offers that opportunity. Another goal is to capture additional individuals and patterns, as well as reduce inefficiencies. So it was known that there are individuals who are being left on the table by their approach, as well as individuals who are being falsely flagged as qualifying. And there's a cost to this screening, leading to a loss of efficiency as well as money. This project had some interesting complexities as well. Their data consisted of millions of individuals over a very large feature space. Now, because this involves medical history, you get into features such as diagnoses codes, procedure codes, incorporating the previous rules-based results. I'm looking at individuals' demographics, such as age, location, gender, and looking at patterns over time, specifically patterns of medical history and how those change. So this brings us to the technical approach. And I'm specifically calling this the technical approach for a reason I think will ultimately become clear and be an obstacle that we needed to overcome. And again, a lesson that we learned early on in this, not to give too much away, is that treating AI projects as purely technical hurdles is a recipe for trouble. So we pursued a multi-pronged approach from simple to complex. But first, we focused on feature engineering, moving on to a more simple logistic regression, building support vector machine models, and neural network. And then finally, after the fact, we followed up with some interesting explainable AI, trying to understand how decisions were being made by these models. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about this feature engineering. So as I mentioned, there are a lot of complex features involved in this project. And being a healthcare AI conference, I figured it would be appropriate to talk a little bit about how we used some medical data. So these ICD-10 codes, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, that these correspond to different diagnoses of a person. So these are completely artificial, manufactured, not tying to a real person. The idea is we have this long list of ICD codes that correspond to a person's medical history. But to be able to use them in a model, we need to be able to convert them to numbers. And a way to do this, to take advantage of some of the relationships between ICD codes, is a technique called word-to-vec. And what's special about this is it takes the whole context of the entire patient population and looks at these patterns of sequences of ICD-10 codes. So things that are related to each other end up having closer representation numerically than things that are more distant. So for example, in a non-medical setting, dog and bone are going to have similar numerical representations, whereas dog and tomato are going to be more different. It's kind of an interesting proof of concept here, or proof of principle. We looked at how natural language processing, this technique, identified some related conditions. So we took one ICD code, this dependence on renal dialysis, and looked at what, after doing these transformations, we looked at what were the most similar ICD codes that popped up according to the model. And these are the top 5, and you can see that they're all related to something involving kidneys or dialysis, so renal, end-stage renal disease, anemia, and chronic kidney disease, and so on. This is kind of an interesting just proof of principle that we're able to capture some of the nuances and complexities of medical data using this technique. All right, now moving on to our modeling approach. We use these 3 machine learning models, the logistic regression, support vector machines, and neural nets. And then a couple takeaways that we found was that the natural language processing reduced codes were vitally impactful at both making the feature space a little bit smaller and manageable while capturing a lot of the important information. And another thing that popped up was that location was an important feature here, more than just medical history. When we shared this finding back with the client, they were not surprised. They said, oh, obviously that's the case, because there's differences in how decisions are made for this particular program by location. And I think this was kind of the first indication that we had not properly vetted all of our organizational complexity and rules and really understanding the fact that we kind of missed this in the initial implication. So following up the initial modeling approach, we went on to look at some explainable AI. So the goal here was to explore explainable AI approaches as a way to both get better understanding of the complex decisions the model is making, as well as get further insights regarding the underlying data and patterns that lead to program qualification. Now, explainable AI refers to the understanding, or an approach to understanding the results of an AI solution in a way that is human interpretable, the anti-black box, so to speak, or peering inside the black box. And the goals in doing this for us were understanding what factors are driving qualification decisions. As I mentioned, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of variables. Can we boil that down to something that is interpretable? And is it interpretable on a population level as well as on an individual level? And what does that tell us about the overall healthcare context? So again, being a healthcare AI conference, I'd like to show just a little technical results here. So this is on simulated data as well. This is not tied to any actual patient or the actual model that we did. But this explainable AI approach gave us a way to look at what variables factored into the decision of whether or not a person qualified for this particular program. And across the population, we're able to come up with a list of the top 10 or something like that features that can then be used to drive these decisions. So this gives additional insight into how the artificial intelligence solution is working and makes it understandable from a human component. So at this point, we did our initial validation and we were showing some pretty promising returns. Our AI approach compared to the rules-based approach proved that, well, simpler approaches proved successful. So the neural net ended up not being particularly useful. So we ended up not pursuing that further. We found that we were able to identify a twofold increase in precision. So a model of how well or a metric of how well the model is doing over their rules-based approach. We were able to identify 2 times the number of individuals and do so with a 35% reduction in identifying individuals who ended up not actually being qualified. So theoretically, this led to an approximate 250% revenue gain, which was looking extremely promising at this point. Then came time for the pilot. So here we're going beyond validation on a static data set and putting into the company's system. This is where things started to go off the rails. So in this organization, there are individuals who take the rules-based output and then do manual outreach to the suggested individuals. And so our approach was to run the model, take the output, basically hand it over and wait for the results. We also had little to no contact with these individuals who are in charge of doing the screening. So I'm guessing at this point, you can imagine how this played out. But just to summarize, the early returns were not looking great. Our expected performance was that of 2 times the original model. However, we were getting a much reduced performance, despite the very promising statistical validation. So we set out to understand what was going on. Our first thought was, oh, these numbers can't be right. So we dug in and we did uncover some data discrepancies. In the production data, there were some examples of different kinds of data or things that were missing that were not in the data we initially used. However, that did not fully or very much explain the situation at all. So the next thing we found is that while we were very well versed in the data and the modeling, we really didn't fully understand their internal processes. How were they working through individuals after they got these results? There was organizational complexity that we were not aware of. When we started digging in, we discovered that we had not done any change management and that there was fundamentally a lack of trust in our results. We are hearing that people were seeing these output and they didn't know what to do with it or really believe or trust it fully. So fundamentally, the success of our project and the realization of some pretty significant gains was being impeded because we didn't take these steps in the beginning. So fortunately, we had this realization before it was too late. We had to take steps towards rectifying the situation. Fixing the data problem was easy enough. It was a matter of getting some different data for the training and putting some parameters around what the data sources would be used in production. It was the human and institutional components that ended up being more complicated and more meaningful. So the first thing we learned from this experience was the importance of understanding organizational complexity from the start. Beyond the immediate people who are participating in the project, what departments are going to be affected? Who are the broader stakeholders? What are their current processes? How will they change in results from these AI solution? What are the pre-existing dynamics and politics in play? When we took a step back to ask these questions, we identified an entire branch of the organization that we had not interacted with during our process, and therefore did not understand their roles and opinions. So we identified who across the organization touched this broader solution and made it a point to meet with them. It was in this meeting that we uncovered lessons 2 and 3, starting with the importance of change management. By change management, I'm referring to the process of obtaining buy-in from all the stakeholders, understanding how their daily activities are going to change and be impacted by the AI solution. This ultimately comes down to education and empowerment, empowering the individuals using this to be trusting and make their decisions based on this information, as well as long-term planning and communication. What is this going to look like in a month, in a year? We met with the additional stakeholders and had a meaningful series of conversations where we really learned about their processes and educated ourselves and them on the goals and motivations behind ours. How were the models made? What decisions were the models making? How are we testing it and comparing it to pre-existing approaches? What was the long-term vision? And really having the goal of empowering them to feel part of the solution. Now, this brings us to arguably the most important lesson of any AI project, in healthcare or in not, the importance of trust. This goes beyond just statistical validation. Is there trust in the long-term goals and processes behind the model? Is there an understanding of how model performance is being measured, what kind of benefits it will bring to the institution? Understanding of what kind of decisions are being made by the models and the ethics or any kind of ethical considerations or biases that might be behind the model as well. How will this be used long-term? So at this point, beginning what was turning into a series of standing meetings with this broader group of stakeholders had already started us down the path of being able to cultivate trust. We were also aided by the fact that we had been exploring these explainable AI approaches behind the scenes and had something to show about how the model is making its decisions. So being able to demonstrate to the employee whose job it was to take these leads who are believed to be eligible and manually show them the reasons as to here is why the model is saying that this person is eligible was really extremely effective in converting the skeptics, having that kind of tangible understanding of how decisions are being made. So after significant discussion and education and learning on both parts, we were in a much better position. There was a mutual appreciation of the intersection between the roles of the model and the roles of the human, and how this could lead to long-term success. We no longer heard objections that individuals were ignoring the model because they didn't trust it, and we started to see some promising movements. And ultimately, the success of this project really hinges on this intersection of artificial intelligence and humans and how they work together. And just as a kind of happy note to end on here, the project is on track to bring in an additional $2 to $4 million in revenue. So we were able to overcome many of these obstacles by really taking into account the human factor within AI. Now, to tie this all back together, we developed a healthcare artificial intelligence solution to predict whether or not individuals may qualify for a particular health-related program. We went from a large feature space of over 200,000 possible attributes, including ICD codes, procedure codes, demographics, used natural language processing to make this manageable. Then we incorporated a layer of explainable AI, providing crucial insight and transparency. And not just from a technical understanding the model process perspective, but also fundamental for gaining trust. So in the process of this solution, it's been several years now, we've landed on some really valuable insights that I'm glad to be able to share with you today. That understanding organizational complexity is key, not to underestimate the need for change management, and that cultivating of trust is fundamental to success. And in doing so, we are on track to help thousands of individuals and bring in significant revenue. So with that, I would like to thank you all for being here today, and I will take any questions. I don't know how questions work here, but if there's chat or anything like that.
Hello, Hannah. Thank you for this lovely presentation. It was very 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 insightful to listen to you. So basically, we have a few questions. First one is regarding I think this is for in the first part. I think this question was given. Basically, how did you have any kind of problem with data privacy because you're using the data like from which data set you have get? So basically, the question is surrounding. If I can formulate it much easier, did you have any bottlenecks regarding data privacy? How do you using data like for your modeling, etc.?
Yeah, so we were using de-identified data, and we were treating it with utmost privacy and regulation and things like that as well.
If I may add to this question, that's for sure. But basically, how much the question was going more in direction? How much is this slowing down the process, and how much is can you share what are the pain points regarding this process? Basically, just to give a bit better overview for the listeners.
Sure. So specifically around data privacy.
Yeah, regarding data you're using.
Yeah, so in this particular case, it didn't slow us down significantly. It was already set up to be de-identified, but I think it's fundamentally important to be mindful of data privacy, even on de-identified data, and take into account all of the possible precautions and room for ethical considerations around privacy, as well as any biases that can come out of any of the personal identifiable information. As well.
Okay, we have second question regarding the modeling. Basically, what we've you said that you had 3 models. So basically, but when you try this model, like during the period of time, did you find out that some models are? Did you try more than 3 models and then you cut down to 3, or this was like the first 3 models you're using right now? So just about the modeling process, if you can a bit more explain the process, how you managed to do so.
Yeah, so we spent a fair amount of time trying out in the very early stages on subsets of data and stuff, trying out a couple of different modeling approaches, and we found some that were proving to be promising. It ended up being a little bit of an ensemble approach, kind of depending on some of the nuances of what we were looking at. But these 3 ended up being the ones that we developed more fully. Yes.
Okay, and the last question for this session is regarding like did you have like any kind of feedback like from the customer side as well, like when they start using your solution? So basically, what was their feedback like? Basically, this kind of communication, if you can a little bit more emphasis about, like, it's not only about modeling and creating creating the solution, but also like to implementing in real time. So basically, how did you solve this process, and can you tell us to share a little bit about that part?
Sure. So ultimately, having these conversations with the client was what made this successful. So understanding what they were looking for, and not just the people who we were directly working with, but the people who were touching other parts of this model or touching other parts of the output. And that is fundamentally what made this successful and made it able so that individuals were able to trust and use our results. If that answers that, yeah.
Okay, Hannah, thank you for your time. It was very lovely to listen to you. We will also sure share this video also after the conference is done with our listeners. And thank you for being part of the first ever Data Science Conference US HealthTech 2021, happening from October 18th to 20 in Cleveland, and as you can see virtually. So basically, it's a hybrid event. So thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Okay, so basically, I will just cut you off right now.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we are soon start with the next speaker. So I will share. Ні, саме слабо є Pradeep. Звісно, його на мовній модельній аналіз. Okay, but you just check Pradeep when to come to okay. Perhaps, yeah. And then okay, okay. Okay, well. It's okay if you want to go into forward, it's not a problem. So basically, like, I'll just put me like I can put the background video. So basically, it's background video is one. So we are waiting for the keynote. Okay. No, it's okay. Like, okay, so he will be there in 10 or 15 minutes. So it's not a problem. Yeah. C'è con sotto di fatto che è stato finito di quello poco che preso avanti. Okay, we are almost ready.
Hello, this is Pradeep.
Hello, just a second. I will just change your name to the
Sure.
to the Google name. Just a second, sorry. Sorry, the wrong one. Can you just share a screen?
And I need to share my screen. Yes, let me do
Just a
that.
check.
How is the sound quality? Are you okay with the sound?
Yep, sound is excellent. Can you just try to see?
All right, let me bring up the deck because I think Olga told me that I should share the deck from my side.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Have you managed to share?
Yes, you don't see it yet?
No.
Let me restart the sharing. I shared. Let me stop and start. How's this now?
Now it's okay. So I will just go with a quick introduction.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We are back in the program. It was we had like a small break, so fasten your seatbelts, and we are starting with the last keynote for today's part of Data Science Conference Healthcare US 2021. Basically, our next speaker is going to be Dr. Pradeep Gall, who is Chief Executive Officer at Self-Care Foundation. Basically, what we can say about Pradeep for his entrance, that he is a healthcare executive with a relentless focus on improving administration, coordination, quality, and efficiency of care. He has 25 years of healthcare experience, CEO, COO, CEO, and CTO, insurance, benefit administration, and public programs. And what we can also say that he's proud father of an amazing talented daughter and hurricane son. In addition to that, we also said that he is a part of, he's CEO of Soul Care. And just like for the introduction, Soul Care is a global healthcare blockchain technology company, which is using innovative approach. They are tirelessly work to solve the complex problems that plague healthcare around the world. Without further ado, I would like to give the mic to the Pradeep. And Pradeep, you can start with your presentation. I will just go mute myself and stop video, and we will be there if anything needed to be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, and it is an honor and a pleasure to speak to all of you today. SolveCare is a very interesting company that I am involved with and proud to be part of. And having spent about 30 years in healthcare administration in various roles, I like to say that we are actually trying to solve the problems that I, in my previous role as CIO or CTO or CEO, struggled to find solutions for. I'm happy to share this deck with you today with the hope that this will stir ideas and thoughts on how we might approach a better way of delivering care to humanity, a more equitable, more efficient, and more effective way of doing things. So let's get started. Many of you who are involved in healthcare have heard this again and again, but those of you are looking at healthcare more as a participant, if you are part of any health policy discussion, you will always find these statements made at the beginning of almost every presentation. We have to find ways to deliver better health for the population we are serving, be it insured population or a Medicare or Medicaid population or a population of patients that a hospital or a hospital system serves. We have to assure better health for those people who rely upon us to deliver better care. And we have to be able to do that in a manner where we deliver the most optimal care at the highest value. These are typically the triple aim, and there is sometimes talked about the quadruple aim, where we also talk about the patient and private provider experience. Now, this slide is not from the US, it's actually from a ministry in the Middle East, the Saudi Arabian government. They published this plan or their vision. And you will find a similar vision in every country, whether you look at Qatar or India or Pakistan or Canada, you will find that these are always stated as the goals. And I put this up here because I want you to understand that our vision for healthcare equity and equanimity is not just a US phenomena. Every society in the world wants the same thing. This is the second thing that you will hear. Let's put the patient in the middle. Let's make sure that all of us act as a team around the patient. Patient-centric care, patient-centered medical homes, building a care model where the patient is empowered to make decisions. We want to give the patient better choice. When you think about the initiatives like the Affordable Care Act, or before that, the Health Information Portability and Accountability Act, or the Health Savings Account projects, all of these sought to do the same thing, give the patient the ability to be an involved, engaged participant. That's the goal. But the truth is not the slide. The truth looks a little bit different. This is how the truth looks like. The patient is a participant, a beneficiary, a receiver of care, a receiver of benefits. And we often, as organizations, including the ones I used to represent, in various C capacities, insurance companies, TPAs, Medicare, Medicaid agencies, hospital systems, all of us choose to interact with each other where we treat the patient as a consumer, not a participant, whom we deliver services or benefits to. And oftentimes a patient has no information or data, nor do they participate in our system-to-system interoperability conversation, nor do they really have the ability to consent to the use of their data, despite what HIPAA says. And for sure, the patient isn't involved in any kind of a transactional capability, and their identity is typically managed by us, not by them. And payment responsibility also often is third party. So we talk about patient-centric care, and we deliver patient exclusionary care is what we actually do. And I think that therein lies the fundamental issue that we both ethically and technologically have failed to answer for the last half a century, which is how do we really empower the patient-doctor interaction to be better? So SolveCare's vision and mission is to rethink that relationship. And we started to ask this question, not recently, but 10, 20 years ago, when I was building very complex eligibility, enrollment, member management, care management, disease management, claims adjudication and payment, revenue cycle management systems. And I realized back then incrementally and increasingly that if you're going to ever build a network coordinated patient-centric model, you're going to have to step outside this architectural paradigm that has taken over most of healthcare, not just in the US, but around the world. And that we are going to have to build network health applications where a patient can participate, where they do have a role and a say in the actual transaction. They actually participate in the business logic, where they actually manage their identity and they have the ability to give consents, and that there is some ownership of data. Custody of the data should not make me owners of the patient data, but rather simply a custodian. And that in communication and coordination, I have to facilitate secure and trusted communication between parties. All of these things, the current architecture of systems that I proudly built for the last 30 years does not support. So we need to think another way, because we cannot achieve what our systems will not permit. So we need to think differently about relationship management. We got to think about what is really important. And if you really think about the most important relationship in healthcare, it's the patient-doctor relationship, not rocket science. You can understand the view that the most important relationship in all healthcare delivery is a conversation between patient and doctor. And if we streamline that conversation, where we facilitate, empower, encourage, and enable that conversation to be more effective, then everything flows from there. Yes, there are other conversations that need to happen: the patient-payer relationship, the doctor-payer relationship, the doctor-specialty relationship, the patient-specialty relationship. There are dozens more. So if you were to stop thinking of healthcare as a process and start thinking of healthcare as a relationship management problem, things get very interesting. You can start to actually solve the systemic and endemic issues of why we haven't been able to fix healthcare in a manner that we claim that we are working so hard to, and yet we never seem to make any meaningful progress. And that is the premise on which I want to base the rest of my presentation, that let's think about healthcare in the context of relationships. I will give you an anecdote which will help you illustrate what I mean by relationship management versus process management. At Blue Cross, I had a design room, and I had my various vice presidents come out to the design room. We had no chairs. You had all the walls that could be written upon, and you could walk around and you could draw on the whiteboards or on the walls and essentially try to simplify complex processes like enrollment, eligibility, adjudication, whatever. And one time, one of my vice presidents brought to me the process of enrolling a new member, and she papered the whole room end to end. It was a 60 feet long process. And then she would trace along the wall, walk me along the wall, and point out the step in the process that needed to be changed if you wanted to enroll members differently or more efficiently. And these are the pre-ACA days when we were trying to rethink how we're going to enroll members directly on the exchanges. And I understood that to make any change in the 60-foot long process is going to require millions of dollars. And it really befuddled me that we could not simply adjust anything in any processes because of the way systems are architected. But at the end of the day, if we were to rethink that business process as a 60-foot long printed process coded over the course of 20, 30 years into actually an ABC triangle, where the patient is the A, the doctor is the B, the payer is the C, and we only focus on A, B, B, C, or C, A relationship at a time, we could do this so much easier. So this long process could actually become a very, very small, tight circle of 3 relationships governing everything. And that is the inspiration behind a relationship management system for SolveCare that SolveCare is building for healthcare. So think of it as Salesforce.com type of a system built for healthcare, where relationships are easy to configure, easy to manage, easy to modify, easy to audit, and not have this cascading impact on every other business process that we are doing, which leads to enormous cost and inefficiency of healthcare that we see, whether you're an insurer or a hospital system, whether you're using Epic or Cerner or McKesson for EMR, or you're using TriZeta for adjudication, problem is the same. These are inflexible systems that claim to do everything, don't do most anything well, and we are required to live by their rules, and modifying them is typically a career bet for the CIO. That shouldn't be the case. So what we decided to rethink is to build a healthcare application platform where secure network applications can be designed and published in minutes and hours or days, not weeks and months and years. And every relationship can be configured quickly, whether it's the application experience or the business logic or the data custody or the security and privacy or the consents around use of data, 100% auditable, and on some kind of a shared fabric where I don't have to buy my own big data center to run an eligibility system. And that is the vision and the mission of what we are doing and what I want you to think about. If you use this relationship management system, and you don't have to use ours for sure, but I want you to think about this. If you were to use a relationship management model, you could do clinical management very differently. You wouldn't have to do disease management along the fixed care pathways, but rather you could configure permitted relationships between doctor and patient around each disease condition or each care method or protocol. Care coordination becomes a simple matter of ensuring the right events get from A to B or B to C or C to A or A to C. So it's become very easy. We could start empowering the physician to do things that today we give a lot of lip service to: risk sharing, value-based contracts, pay for performance, provider education and engagement. Those are big fancy words, but they don't really work in the real world because we don't give the physician the flexibility to treat an individual. And individuals aren't statistics. So we build systems for statistics, but reality is physicians serve patients and who are individual human beings with individual needs. So physician efficacy is a function of granularity. Care gaps and care opportunities. You could do the same with administrative processes, completely change the way we enroll or adjudicate or pay or re-verify or do referrals or pre-authorization. And same with financials. You can completely rethink how you do financial models. Let me give you some examples. On our platform, we built a provider reward program, which is essentially a value-based care administration module. And this network's job is to continuously measure providers' gains against their value-based care contract terms and how much they could earn should they take certain action before the clock runs out, such as missed A1C appointments or the missed podiatry exams or the opportunity to bring the patient in and do a multi-purpose visit versus a single-purpose visit, or missed opportunities around sending the patient engagement and education materials. There are so many terms to a value-based care model. And every day they get more and more complex as the payers who are issuing the VBCs are saying, hey, I want you to do more to engage the patient. How do you measure and track all those things that you're committing to against which you're going to end up writing a check or end up losing money? So we implemented this event-based care management system in the context of value-based care administration for doctors. A second example, in partnership with Boehringer Ingelheim, we built a diabetes care coordination network where physicians and patients who are trying to deal with a high-risk patient who has a heart condition and a risk and type 2 diabetes that is either semi-controlled or uncontrolled. How do we make sure that the patient and the family members are engaged in preventing risk of death or stroke or any other event? So this is another use of the same platform, a diabetes care coordination network. A third network we built is around the managing the risk of at home employees returning to work, and the risk of exposure and the mental health and the stress issues that go with being remote and then returning to work and doing a hybrid model of work from home, work from the office. And how do they communicate safely and securely with each other? How do they assess the risk to themselves and their colleagues? And how do they communicate with HR in a secure, private manner? The fourth network that we built is a global open physician network, essentially Teladoc without boundaries. And the idea here is that physicians worldwide can engage and enroll in this network and offer services to patients worldwide based on compliance and regulatory and consent model that the patient and doctor can have. And you can create thousands of relationship models between a patient in India and a doctor in Nigeria, or a doctor in India and a patient in Nigeria. Tens of thousands of such care relationships can be individually configured, permitting a much more open network of care access. A fifth network that we are currently working on is the remote patient monitoring network around at-home care and continuous monitoring of patients who do need to be monitored and should be under the care of a physician. And we want to make sure that the physician has up-to-date information, but not just a flow of data, but actionable events on which they can actually do something and ignore the rest. So this notion of continuous data capture doesn't get you to physician interaction. The physician needs to know when it is time for them to intervene. And is it really for them to intervene, or it should be a care coordinator or a nurse or a administrative assistant stepping in? That whole notion of provider, patient, and coordinator triangle is what this network number 5 does. And network number 6 is around behavioral and mental health management, particularly focus on suicide prevention in teens, but really going beyond that to help patients who are, or family members largely, who are providing care to those who are troubled and are not able to make good decisions themselves. And last but not the least, a coordinated medical transportation management network, primarily built for Medicaid in mind, with the idea that instead of Medicaid vouchers, let's use a coordinated network where provider appointment, patients pick up or return location, and the state appointed care coordinator can all collaborate through a care network to use commercially available rides rather than highly expensive and limited availability of specialty rides. So getting the patient to the doctor's office, instead of issuing them a voucher, giving them a prepaid Lyft or Uber ride, is a much more efficient and less fraudulent and far more effective way to link the ride to the actual care. Now, why do I share all this with you? I want you to think about not so much what we have done, but rather these as examples of what you might do yourself. And the idea here is that if you stop thinking of healthcare as linear processes that flow left to right and have 70 steps along the way and 20 participants jump in and out of the process, that is the reason why we rely upon system interoperability as the solution to all problems. And if any of you have been involved in systems in healthcare, you know this interoperability is a utopia that we never seem to achieve. Because more interoperability we seek, the more silos we build. So the idea here is that we need to rethink healthcare delivery fabric. The healthcare delivery fabric should not be process-centric. It should be relationship-centric. You should configure relationships and then permit certain transactions between those relationships. And that way you can decompose very long, 60-foot-long printed processes into a tight triangle that you can modify either of the 3 axes easily without having to modify this long-running processes. And that brings you to a much more effective tool. So now let's bring you to how that happens. So we use blockchain as a coordination fabric to achieve all this. So blockchain acts, many people think of blockchain as some kind of a cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. Yes, those are all valid use cases, but that's not what we're after. We are after using blockchain as an immutable ledger of events between any party and every other party. So using the blockchain, we can control both the identity as well as the consents that were granted, as well as events that were exchanged, as well as transactions that took place or were incomplete, as well as the ability to stamp certain data to be seen by others or not be seen by others, or interoperability, and ultimately having this immutable ledger that says, here is what happened, here is what didn't happen. And that ability becomes really transformative if you have this indisputable system of record, to use some healthcare terminology here, but it allows every participant of the ledger to maintain control and autonomy over how they participate. So I don't need to have some big, huge identity and access management database, which I control, which all of you have to trust that I know how to keep secure, and that all of you have to submit your identity into my database for you to get insured benefits from me. You can maintain your identity, and you can simply interact with me on a need-be basis, revealing as little or as much of your identity as is needed, and linking all your data, your consents, your payments, your audit, your events to that identity that you control as a patient or as a doctor. In a nutshell, we are basically trying to disintermediate the very parties that patients and doctors hate. I was a payer CIO. I remember a time when I did a road trip through my state, spoke to many, many, many physicians in town halls, meetings, in the gyms, and in the city halls. And universally, I got one message from them: get out of the way. You interfere in the care with my patient. You don't facilitate or empower me or the patient. And I understood that all these well-intended programs that I was building and launching at Blue Cross for the benefit of patient or doctor wasn't going to be adopted by anyone because they didn't trust me in the role that I was. And this platform takes away that dependency of trust me, I know what I'm doing, and I have your interest in mind, and replaces that with trust no one but yourself, but collaborate with everyone that you need to. So having said that, there are very powerful mechanisms available to drive event from patient to doctor, doctor to payer, payer to patient, and keeping everybody coordinated. But think of it this way: everybody shares the ledger, everybody can read their part of the ledger, and everybody can write to the ledger what they are permitted to write to given their role, and you can build a very, very powerful fabric of coordination and delivery of healthcare. These are more technical diagrams. For those of you in the audience who are technically minded, we're more than happy to take your questions. I'm sharing this with you so that it can spur a new thought in your head as to how you might consider delivering healthcare for the future. Because looking backwards, we're going to find many of the root causes of why we are where we are. Looking ahead, I'm presenting you a model that gives us a way towards a much more equitable care delivery framework. Whether you're a health system or a pharmacy network or a insurer like myself, this is the platform that gives you the ability to deconstruct healthcare processes and reconstruct relationships. End of the day, one of the key core principle here is that patient and doctors control their data. The data is decentralized, where there is no central database to hack for anyone. Data sharing is always between A and B, or B and C, or C and A, by consent on both sides. And all relationships can be audited visibly, but identities of who the related parties are can be kept private. But no matter what happens on the network, you can always analyze the event without having to know the identity of the event generator or the receiver, which means you can achieve an unprecedented level of compliance and audit. I'll leave you with one last thought. I was very involved in the HIPAA days. And we thought that HIPAA is going to really give the patient the power. But here is the thing. Today, the way HIPAA works, the moment you walk into a clinical setting, you sign away all your HIPAA rights. And after that, you never think about them. Because the bottom line is HIPAA rights are traded the moment you request care. Yeah, if you don't sign the HIPAA consents, you don't get care. So what do? I simply think of HIPAA as a burden, not an enabler, not in any way, shape, or form driving better care, but rather something I have to get rid of from my interaction between patient and doctor. What this kind of a system that I'm presenting to you can do is actually give the patient and the doctor the security and the autonomy they need to protect themselves and their data without having to give away those rights right at the beginning. So in the end, the idea is to build a platform on which you can build very powerful digital health networks where different parties can be defined, their roles can be defined, their relationships can be quickly defined, what events they exchange can be defined, what data they can share with each other is defined quickly. And as a result of that, you can build very powerful clinical, administrative, and financial health systems. That is a mission and vision of SolveCare. That's what we are doing today as a company. But really the purpose today here is not to talk about SolveCare, the company, but rather a better model of healthcare delivery. Whether you administer benefits or you do billing and payments and revenue cycle management, or you are the party doing care coordination and disease management, or you want to launch teleconsultation that goes beyond episodic care, or you want to be doing continuous data collection to do better interventions and timely interventions, or you're handling complex care or home care, or you are really advocating for patients' rights to be restored and identity and dignity to be restored to them, or you're focused on practice transformation, the fundamental question is still the same. How are we going to do things differently? And this model that I presented to you is, let's do things differently. We've been very fortunate to be regarded by many third parties as being very innovative and disruptive. And we think the real disruption here is when the patient gets better care and the provider is more effective and finds joy in practicing medicine once again. But regardless, it is nice to be recognized by the industry. But more importantly, what I want you to think about is that the healthcare problem in one way or the other is very similar across the planet. The reimbursement models may differ. We might be dealing with subsidized care or capitated care payment models, or we might be dealing with fully insured models, and in Canada, you might be dealing with a central payer or single authority, or you might have self-pay model for India and China. The issue isn't who reimburses whom. That's a part of the issue, but that's not the issue. The issue is how do we manage care delivery across the clinical, administrative, and financial capabilities of the healthcare system underpinning care. And that's where we are focused on. We welcome your comments. I would personally welcome any commentary or criticism or ideas you might have in how we can help you be more effective in your administrative or clinical or financial mission of delivering healthcare. And we would love to hear how we can collaborate. But end of the day, I hope that today's presentation will challenge you to think different, because healthcare of all industries requires, indeed demands, that we think things differently. Thank you for your time. I appreciate everyone listening, and I look forward to hearing from most of you with your thoughts and feedback. Have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you, Pradeep, for this talk. It was wonderful, and it was very insightful, to be honest, like to hear a different way how we can do basically healthcare, because I truly do believe that every industry has a big room for improvement and for challenging ourselves personally. Are we doing the best? So I will first start. There was like I'll go in order. First question was when you said that the healthcare institutions should be custodians, not owners of the personal data of the patients. So basically, if you can just maybe elaborate in a few sentences, what does a patient get if they are the owner, and what is the biggest change in this paradigm? Basically, I think that the people perhaps didn't understand, and I also think that this is very important message you need to send in the ether.
I will answer this question in two different ways. First, I'll give you an anecdote. There was during the early 2010-11 timeframe, I was involved in many health information exchange implementations, and we built these mega highways with the idea that everybody will connect with everybody, and we will create this virtual record of care, where no matter where I go within a geographical window, let's say my state. Okay. All hospitals, all pharmacies, all clinics will be coordinating and sharing data on the HIE. And therefore, we'll have this virtual care record where all of us can maintain custody of patient data, but they'll have this virtual view of all our custody data in our respective custodies. I got a big grant from the federal government. The governor appointed me to build the state HIE. We went ahead and built it, spent a couple $100 million. There was no data in the HIE. Why? Because all the custodians of data decided that it's not in their best interest to publish that data. And at that point in time, patient interest wasn't in nobody's mind. Everybody was focused on, hey, this data, if I put it there, my competitive hospital system down the road can look at it and they can analyze it, and they can do things that, or maybe the big bad Blue Cross can start interfering in my care model and they'll change my reimbursement rate. There are 1,000 things why people didn't publish the data. The bottom line is nobody did. So the patients in my state did not get any kind of a longitudinal data set that we promised them when we spent $250 million of the taxpayer money. Yeah. It wasn't lack of technology, it was the conflicting business models. So the best person who's most interested in having a longitudinal record of care and who it benefits the most is the patient. Yeah. And we have made it that almost impossible today for a patient to reconstruct. their care. Anything beyond 30, 60, 90 days, forget it. You don't even remember where your data is sitting, let alone assemble it. So if we are being truly honest with ourselves, we have the right to a copy of the data that is related to the episode of care we managed as a hospital system or as a care provider. But neither we nor the patient has a longitudinal view. And if anybody's going to have that view, it should be patient, because it's their health data. So if you talk about portability, if you talk about effective care, if you talk about optimal outcomes, somebody needs to have that data view, and nobody better than the patient to have that data. Because interoperability and portability of data is the right of the patient, not us as the custodians of data. We need to have custody of data for business rights, for legal rights, for protecting our care model, for our care, for defending our care delivery. Yes, but that's a block in the chain, not the whole chain. Because even if you seek it, you're not going to get it. And the moment we seek to build this chain privately, we actually fail at it from the day one. Mission impossible. The only possible mission here is for the patient to have the chain and for us to have the block. And that's where we come from. The second is that for us to do any kind of a true care delivery across a time frame where we talk about cradle to grave care, we talk about patient-centered medical home, all of these things are ultimately relying upon us having relevant information. And here's the funny thing, the EMR tells me that I have prescribed 4 medications to my patient, but I actually don't know what they're taking. The only true source of information is what the patient actually tells me when I see them 90 days apart during their check-in visits. So who actually is the real source of data here for the most part? Yes, I am as a clinical care provider, but so is the patient, and they have a better, more complete view. So those are the 2 reasons why I've long believed that while every care provider has the right to their version of the block, the only person who can actually own the chain is the patient. And if you're ever going to have a longitudinal view of information used solely for the purpose of the patient, let's put the chain in the hands of the patient.
Yeah, I can relate to that. We'll have tomorrow one of the things that's engaging patients in the basically that's the latest concept that is proven to have the most impact. Basically, is to engaging patient in the diagnostic process, to also understand their data and to also monitor the data, because they are like you said, that's the premises behind it, that philosophy that the person in charge of his own or her own body is the one who knows the best what is happening. Maybe not all the time he can explain, but he can give the good feedback and good let's say small signs to the practitioners of healthcare in the healthcare industry. So being said that, the second question is, and I will also just take 1 minute also to emphasize one thing, and I would like to hear your is why did you choose diabetes as one of the primary things? I would just like to add that I have a personal experience also with my girlfriend. She's a diabetic, and most of the persons who are not know anyone who has this problem doesn't understand how big this problem is, and how it can create a lot of very strange situation in life. And it's very important to talk about it. And there is a lot of people with diabetes, but you just think, okay, that everything is normal. So the question is, how and why did you choose diabetes in one of the primary networks in your company?
So look, every chronic disease destroys human life and human value in ways that is hard to comprehend unless you experience it yourself. And most of us at some point or the other will have a chronic disease to contend with. Diabetes has some unique properties. Number one property is prevalence, right? This is one of the most prevalent diseases out there, and it has such a outsized impact on you, on your lifestyle, on your life, and your ability as a human being to function. But in terms of number scale, it's massive global issue. It's not just a first world or a second world or a third world problem. You have a preponderance of diabetics in the US because of our lifestyle and eating habits, but you have a preponderance of diabetics in India. You have a preponderance of diabetics in the Middle East. So it's a global phenomenon. It's a global negative phenomenon that impacts almost every one of us. I mean, personally, my father, I lost him to diabetes and diabetes-related complications that probably played a role. But in the end, we are focused on any and all chronic disease management. Now, we are fortunate to have partnered with Boehringer Ingelheim, which has a huge commitment to improving diabetes care coordination and to improving patient education and engagement, and to improving physicians' ability to deal with diabetes and its complexities. So, it's one of those causes where we can all unite behind. And then we had a very strong commitment from Boehringer Ingelheim to build this network where it was with the patient in mind at all times. So philosophically, we aligned with them. And I think the third reason is diabetes impacts so much. It creates such a complex impact on your body. It's not just about your blood sugar, what it does to your organs, your eyes, your feet, your memory, your ability to function. It has an outsized impact. So you need a team. It's a coordination problem. And you need to continuously adapt the situation to the right participants in the team. So it's a continuously evolving team problem. And we figured that if we can crack that nut, we can crack almost every other nut.
Okay, this sounds very interesting. We have one additional question regarding your network, and two regarding the structure. So I think that this all, if something is come across, I will also read it. But first one is related the prevention, prevention regarding the mental issues and mental issues. So basically, the question is how much more stress the network was during COVID-19, and basically, do you have any kind of data if it's different between the ages, different groups of ages, like basically between the minors, between, I don't know, minors not using your network, but the young people, young adults, somebody who is like middle age or old age. So do you have any kind of data how they are the different approach toward this mental issue problem, which is also, I think, very important to stress about?
That's a very insightful question. It's obviously from someone who thinks about mental health impact on society, because what we found as we are working with various organizations is that there has been an outsized impact on young adults and pre-adult teens more than adults. We have all had enormous stress from what COVID did to, there's a world before COVID and a world after COVID, and we're still adjusting to this and probably will adjust for a decade to come. But for children, for young teens and young adults, it has been outsized impact because they haven't had the faculty to adjust to this suddenly different world. We are focused on today working with a very powerful, very compelling group out of India who focuses on teen suicides. And so it's young adults who are not able to cope with the pressure of society, education, their career, and then COVID layered on a huge stress. And what we have heard from them and what the data they have shared with us, and we are more than happy to share the data with those who wish to see it, that the impact and the fatal self-harm has gone up by order of 4 to 5x, meaning the number of suicides per 10,000 young adults is gone up a significant multiplier, not a few percentages. So we were compelled by that. We felt that if there was a timely and safe interaction between the child or the teenager or the young adult in stress with a safe pair of ears who could hear and counsel, and if you could protect the identity of both sides, we did not ask them to reveal their location or their any information they don't want to reveal, but to allow them to be referred without having any revelation they don't wish to make, or to escalate the case, essentially to de-identify the individual, but still run a full care model around them. That was the two intersecting curves. We're going to have to protect the identity for as long as we can till they get to the point where they're willing to reveal the identity from a care perspective, but still run a complete care model that can prevent or delay a suicidal action. So it's a very important but difficult balance, if you will. But it is achievable and it is getting achieved. So this is not outside the realm of thinking about what kind of a relationship do you want to allow between the initial contact or the psychologist or the psychiatrist, and how do you give the subject, the patient, a sense of control, which is very important for them. So those are the kind of philosophical point of view that align with the platform's philosophy. So it was a good fit. But we have only scratched the surface. I think there is so much that can be done there. but we are just starting to get into that space.
In one moment, I would like to connect you with representatives of InfoBit, which is unicorn from Europe, Western Balkan, which are doing the messaging system. And one of their future projects they would like to come is that basically creating a model also who is going to help the people with mental issues. So basically, I think that possibly cooperation, just talking about possible cooperation between these two big companies, yours and InfoBip, I think that can lead to something really great, basically. So I will take let's say I will do this connection after the conference is finished. I think that this can be a good fit. Like it can be we will see. Nothing promising, but it maybe can be solid because they have one additional insights right regarding messaging and how to do NLP and ML. So it can be a cool joint venture. But I will do that after conference. Regarding to last question, they are a little bit more technical question. So basically, one question is regarding it was regarding data security, and it was like how does it anonymization between data is working between the different layers in the ledger. So basically, it was like the question was what is the secure point when we are sure that there is no like anybody, the third party source is not having the data because they're on the ledger. So and how we are and also how do we secure that we are not providing to the wrong person data like just because we don't understand fully how to operate with the technology. So did you have these kind of things thinking about in your, I suppose yes, but I will let you to answer.
That's a great question. I must admit that I'm a data scientist by education, and I'll probably always be a data scientist and a data architect, no matter what role I play. So these are very important. This is a very fundamentally important question. And in healthcare, I think you have to decompose every transaction between two parties into at least a very well-defined data layers, if you will. And those of you who are data architects will know what I'm talking about. But generally speaking, if you think in layman's terms, let's say that I interact with my doctor and I want to simply make a request to come see the doctor tomorrow. There is certain identity information that I have, such as who I am, what my, do I have an existing provider relationship with that provider, patient-provider relationship with this doctor, or is it a new one? Do I have existing consents in place? Do I have an insurance plan? Do I have a copay co-insurance and whatever? So there is a certain, these are different data elements. And there is, of course, clinical data on, am I currently on medication? Do I have certain disease conditions? What are my current symptoms or issues I'm reporting? That's a clinical side. And a third is around, what other, care history do I have that is relevant to this particular episode? So you have identity data, you have transaction parameters, you have financial and reimbursement questions, and you have the clinical parameters, right? Those are at least very basic building blocks of any healthcare transaction. So what you can do and you should do in each relationship, whether it's AB or BC or CA relationship, you can put these data points in different places. So for example, the identity of the patient in our system, and you can design similar systems without, with slightly different variations. The general construct is that there is a identity box, in our case, the care wallet, where the patient identity or the doctor identity resides. And that identity is only shared to the degrees necessary for the transaction to flow. So if I want to make a request for an appointment, I only need to reveal the fact that I'm insured with Blue Cross Blue Shield, I have a valid policy, and I am an existing patient, and that should be enough for me to get through most of the transaction. Versus if I'm requesting an online teleconsult, the amount of data I'm going to share is different. So the point here is that you can manage this data security the following. First is decompose the data into its various intrinsic properties, then see if that data needs to be linked to the event, or is that data that is not linked to the event. If it's not linked to the event, you don't share it. Third is attach consents to both sides, one's issuing side and the receiving side. The issuer is essentially sending the data with the consent for the other party to receive it. And the fourth is encrypted. So the way in our system things work is when party A sends a health event to party B, could be a clinical event, could be an administrative event, could be a financial event, the party A stamps that event on the chain, thereby agreeing, digitally signing that event to say, I am agreeing to send this event to Alex, okay? Now, the content of that event is going to, of course, be definable based on the event's needs. You don't need to know the name of my dog to check certain attributes about this event. Only event-specific payload crosses over to the other side. The Alex, when he receives that event, has received a key from me as part of that signature, saying you can read this event and you can see what the data attached to it is. But you can deny forwarding capability. You can say, look, if this event is forwarded to somebody else, the key will be invalid. Yeah. So there are some very sophisticated ways, particularly if you use cryptography like blockchain does, and you do data tiering, and you link the data to an event to a relationship, and relationship to two parties, you can control everything. You can literally control every healthcare transaction, and you can meet and exceed the intent of HIPAA or GDPR or high-tech, because those laws were written with a core principle that the data, that there is a party who benefits and should control the use of their information, and there's a party who needs that data to deliver value to party A. And that intent is impossible to do in current centralized databases, because the moment you give data to somebody, it becomes theirs, in their custody. In our system, and system like ours, you can actually share data without giving up ownership of it. You can define its purpose, its forwardability, and its duration. You can even expire the key after 30 days and say, look, after 30 days, this key is no longer valid and you can't open that record again. Yeah. So much more granular control over data is needed, merited, and we've been working on it for years and will continue to enhance that data management capability.
Okay, this is very insightful. Thank you. This is like awesome. I think the perfect opportunity to talk about it, because it's not only about the Solve Care as application, but also like about the philosophy behind it, because people do tend to forget that in the end also programming and architecture is also about putting your philosophy inside of it, and your view of how technology should be used. But people do tend to forget this. We have two questions. One question additionally I get from directly from Cleveland as well. First one is regarding the in one part you were talking about the communication between the different stakeholders and involving patients. So the question was, does this mean that the patient will be overwhelmed with the notifications, because like to read it correctly, there is too much notifications right now. One more notification, not something that is possibly needed. So basically, if you can just give us an overview, what does this standpoint from a view of the user, basically of the patient, how does this work?
It's a brilliant question, and the answer is, of course, the last thing you and I need is another pop-up text message on your device. So there is a difference between the wallet and the node. So I will try to explain this. So when interaction happens between a physician and a patient, or patient and a pharmacy, or a pharmacy and a pair, or whatever the A and B parties, A, B, C, D parties are, doesn't really matter. Each of them has a node, and the node is where you define event handlers. So your objective as a network designer is not to just propagate every event that you receive up to the wallet of the individual, the human being. Your job is to have 99% of these events handled automatically or through the event handlers on your node. Let me give you an example. In our system, if you're a physician, one of the implementations, there are many variations, but in the Global Telehealth Exchange, a physician can publish their availability. That does not go into a centralized database. It's on their own node. When a patient in Bangladesh wants to see a pediatrician, they put a request on the chain. That request is picked up by pediatric networks who have a signature of pediatrician. Those nodes then individually process and evaluate the request against the availability and provide a response in real time saying, yes, the physician has availability between 3:15 and 3:45 a.m. this morning. And is actually agreeing to accept patients in that window of time. I'm giving you an extreme example here. And the node will respond to that event without the physician wallet being notified. There's nothing yet to be done. Only when the patient makes an appointment and pays for it, does that slot get booked on the node. The node sends a secure digital token to the other side saying, I have confirmed your appointment. Here's your token handle. This is how you can open a teleconsultation session with me when the time comes. And the token will activate at 3:44 or 3 or 4 a.m. when your call is scheduled to begin. You can do all kinds of wonderful things there. So the idea here is that the physician does not need to be notified of any event that took place at the node level until and unless a transaction has consummated, in which case you do. So there's a big difference between handling events and propagating events. to the human being. And our vision, my vision, has always been majority of healthcare transactions do not require either the patient or the doctor to be online and interacting with each other. We can do most of the work at their digital identity level, because each individual's digital identity is in their node, and their node is evergreen. While I'm sleeping, my node is working. So in many ways, we are flipping the idea of my database, my system, my Epic, my Cerner, everybody connect to it and do whatever you need to do it. And I'll tell you when it's up and I'll tell you when it's down. And I'll tell you who can see what, to you all have your mini computers essentially in the cloud. And your space, your compute space, your data space, your identity space, and your business logic space is in your control, but you don't need to be awake for that space to be active, right? So the decentralized compute model that we have allows physician to not be notified of most anything. Because frankly, the last thing we need to do is to tell the doc how we're handling all the administrative stuff. All the doc needs to know is, what is my schedule tomorrow morning? When I wake up, I see my schedule, I know I have 62 appointments, I'm good to go.
Yeah, that's right. I totally agree on that. Okay, the last question is from the Cleveland. So could we provide assistance for those who have comprehension issues when it comes to the transition healthcare data, tracking for their health improvements and what they are to do?
If I understand the question, I didn't fully follow it. You're speaking
I'll
about—
just read it again.
Could you please? Yes.
Could we provide assistance for those who have comprehension issues when it comes to the transition healthcare data, tracking for their health improvements and what they are to do?
Great question. So if we are talking about an impaired patient ability to take care of themselves, be it mental health, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, if we're talking about physical immobility, or they are in an institution or they are hospitalized, you can clearly create we have this notion of care circle, and the care circle is essentially people that the patient has invited to represent them, either purely from a mental support perspective or from a financial support perspective or from a delegated authority perspective. So a care circle is something that a patient can create and delegate certain authority to them, either proactively or situationally. So in that regard, reduced comprehension or literacy problems or dexterity problems or whatever you might have, and you will have all of those combinations, you can delegate that authority to a different care wallet who can then act on your behalf. But they can only act on your behalf for as long as you wish, and you can revoke that consent, and they will then be removed from your ability to access your node. So there is certain degree of thought process that goes into architecture of a platform like ours, where you have to think about delegated authority. You have to think about the ability for someone to assume authority, even if they didn't have the delegated authority, because there is no other alternative. For instance, a trauma case where the patient is brought in with no ability to communicate. How do we assume the role of a guardian or a caretaker till such time when a truly authorized person can show up or not? So delegation of authority is done through the wallet. Same is true with comprehension or mobility or dexterity issues and restraints. But it's an imperfect solution. I do not want you to think that technology will fix this 100%, because there will be law, there will be governance issues, there's ethical issues involved in how and when authority should be assumed when it has not been explicitly granted. So the idea is to permit all those variations and those societally important things to be configured in a relationship. But I'll tell you, the way we would configure a power of attorney or a authority to a third party in US would not fly in India. So India, the delegated relationship model is going to be different. It's not because law is different, but human expectations are different. Sure. So I think those kind of things, the level of privacy that a patient is comfortable with, or lack of privacy a patient is comfortable with in a family-oriented model of care coordination, such as Asia tends to be, would not fly in the US either. So it takes me back to my original point. Relationship management is not just a technological goal, it's also a human goal in enabling the patient-doctor, patient-family member relationships to actually function in a way that healthcare can be delivered effectively. And they are gonna be different for the same signature. Your patient-doctor relationship or patient-family member relationship and the level of authority you wanna delegate in the G20 is probably different than you're going to delegate in the developing nation. So we have thought about it in the context of enabling relationships to be configured, but we have not mandated what relationship makes the most sense. But that's a very local thing, like religion and politics. You got to configure healthcare to the needs of the population.
Okay. Pradeep, thank you. Didn't have any more question. I think that this was like the talk for itself was the answering to the question. So because I like to have when we are having this kind of discussion after the talk as well, because that means that the talk has bounced good among the public. So basically, what I want to tell you once again in front of organizing team of Data Science Conference US HealthTech 2021, which is the first time organized on the territory of US. I would like to say a big thank you, because I think this was like the best possible way to finish the first day of the conference. Like I said, I would like I will also communicate with you to connect with you at InfoB, because I think this these 2 points together can possibly create something very important for not only for one part of the world but for whole society. In the end, like I said, I will contact, because I think this kind of talks and this kind of sharing philosophy things about the should be much more bigger, how to say, bigger stage, like as well, like, and much more spaces to talk about. So if you have time, I will also like to invite you to come on our biggest event annual in November, basically, which is Data Science Conference Europe 2021 as well. So if you have time, we would like also to see you there as a keynote, possibly. If you have time, of course, we can talk about it later. So once again, I would like to say thank you to everyone, to all of our attendees. It was the second day was also very we had a lot of cool talks, a lot of important talks, and sharing our thoughts regarding how we can create a data-driven digital transformation health delivery. So basically, this is the end for today. We are continuing tomorrow at 12 o'clock at noon. Actually at 12:15 to be precise. And our first keynote speaker is going to be Tony Ambrosi, who is CEO and Chief Development Officer of Baptist Health in Florida. So basically, he will. I think that he will join us from New York online. But like I said, this is that we are continuing moving forward tomorrow. Pradeep, thank you once again, and we will for sure stay in touch.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Alex, and all of you who attended and listened and asked great questions. It is my honor, and I look forward